Hi, I'm Isabel, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how my opening sequence, Bad Day, uses or challenges conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues. Before creating my film, I researched the codes and conventions of psychological thrillers. I analyzed films that focus on internal fear rather than physical violence. I discovered that common conventions of this genre include low-key lighting, isolated protagonist, enigma codes, minimal dialogue, slow pacing, and the use of sound to build tension. In Bad Day, I deliberately followed many of these conventions to ensure my opening sequence clearly fits the psychological thriller genre. For example, I used low-key lighting inside the house to create the shadows and visual unease. The dim environment reflects the protagonist's mental state and immediately establishes a tense atmosphere. This aligns with traditional thriller cinematography, where darkness symbolizes fear and instability. I also used an isolated protagonist, which is a common convention in psychological thrillers. My character is physically alone in the house, which reinforces vulnerability and creates tension. However, her isolation is not random. It is directly linked to her agoraphobia. This makes her isolation psychologically motivated rather than simply situational. Sound was extremely important in my opening sequence. I used thunder at the beginning as a disruptive sound bridge to immediately create suspense before the visuals even appear. Later, I used silence intentionally. In psychological thrillers, silence often creates more anxiety than loud sound effects. The knock at the door then acts as a sharp contrast, creating a moment of shock and narrative disruption. I also included enigma codes, particularly the red envelope. The audience does not know who sent it or what it contains. This follows the convention of mystery within thriller openings, encouraging the audience to continue watching to find answers. However, I did not simply follow conventions, I also challenged them. In many thrillers, female characters are portrayed as overly emotional, irrational, or weak. In Bad Day, although my protagonist suffers from agoraphobia, I avoided presenting her as helpless. Instead, I focused on subtle expressions and controlled performance to portray anxiety realistically. I wanted her fear to feel internal and authentic rather than exaggerated. This links directly to representation. My film represents the social issue of mental health, especially agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is often misunderstood or stereotyped in media. Instead of presenting it dramatically, I portrayed it as a quiet, isolating, and deeply personal. By doing this, I highlight how anxiety disorders can trap individuals within their own safe space. The house symbolizes both protection and imprisonment. This duality reflects modern societal issues, especially among young people who experience anxiety and isolation. Ideologically, my film challenges the stigma around mental illness. Rather than depicting the protagonist as crazy, I present her as vulnerable but human. This encourages empathy from the audience rather than judgment. Looking back at my pre production planning, I intended to create tension through atmosphere rather than action. I planned to rely heavily on lighting, sound, and symbolism. I believe the final outcome aligns strongly with my original vision. The mood, the pacing, and mystery elements were successfully executed, and the psychological tone remains consistent throughout the opening sequence. Overall, Bad Day both follows and subtly challenges psychological thriller conventions, while representing the important social issue of agoraphobia in a realistic and empathetic way.